The North European ice is a tundra that has now dominated much of Europe, 5 million AD, making the orchards and vineyards long gone. The world is deep in a period of glaciation. 5 million AD, the planet is once again dominated by ice caps, as it was in the Pleistocene epoch, 2 million BC. So much water is locked up in the ice caps that global sea levels are nearly about 150 meters lower than they were during the Holocene. Ice sheets over a kilometer thick cover most of North America and the whole of Scandinavia, reaching down into northern Europe. Where once the craggy coastline of southwest Great Britain boasted semi-tropical plants which flourished in coves warmed by the Gulf Stream, there is now blizzard-swept tundra. The continental shelf which spreads out from the British Isles and France is an exposed, frozen plain of sand and gravel deposits and frozen soil. On a winter's night, temperatures fall below -60 degrees Celsius and wind chill makes it feel even colder. Come the brief summer, conditions improve a little. The edge of the ice cap lies sparkling to the north, its meltwater running in gravel-choked streams across the flat tundra. Water collects everywhere in lakes and ponds, unable to drain away through the permanently frozen subsoil, or permafrost. Rocks lie in polygonal patterns, covering broad expanses of land. The bitter, boulder-cracking frosts of winter have heaved one up from the soil in successive freeze-thaw cycles and rolled them together in curving lines. Dome-shaped mounds, called pingos, rise up from the tundra, formed around a core of ice. A pingo occurs where deeper water has sprung through the permafrost or in sites where lakes have progressively frozen from the sides towards the center. Despite the harsh cycle of fierce winters and brief summers, there is life here. The permafrost does not favor deep roots, but certain forms of flora are tough enough to eke out an existence from the frozen soil. Clusters of cotton grass border the lakes, undulating meadows of small, hardy lichens and grasses cover the raised land between the gravel deposits and streambeds. Tight clumps of heather form a rooting site for many varieties of small flowering plants, the only plants which might be considered. Trees are closer to shrubs, and even these hug the ground. Species of willow send their gnarled trunks horizontally and spread their branches across the earth, as if unwilling to raise their heads into the bitter winds that will inevitably come with winter. When spring arrives in northern Europe, water from melting ice runs in narrow, muddy torrents between the banks of shingle that choke the riverbed. The thaw softens the surface soil and turns large areas of the tundra into marsh, dotted with pools. Because of the climate conditions, the fly life cycle is accelerated. They mate and reproduce in an incredibly short period of time during the brief thaw. Migrant birds wheel in and out of the swarms, making the best of the bonanza. Migrant birds fare particularly well here. They weather out the winters in less extreme regions further south and travel to these bleak lands in the fleeting summer months to take advantage of the quick and intense growth cycle of the flies. The spring sun will slant through the clouds of insects, illuminating the reddish fireweed, the yellow, powdery male flowers of the low willows and the white heather bells. All these plants grow in shallow pockets of soil, in contrast to the orange and yellow lichens that coat the frost-shattered rocks. Shagrats are the largest mammals in the northern European region. Their layered coats protect them from the cold climate of the northern tundra. The shagrat is a species of herd-living, sheep-sized rodent native to the North European ice of 5 million AD, ranging from the ice sheet in the north to the edges of the French coniferous forests in the south. A seasonally migratory animal which subsits mainly on tundra grasses, it is the region's largest terrestrial animal in 5 million AD. The shagrat is descended from the alpine marmot. The shagrat evolved from the alpine marmot, but as far as their basic body plan goes, they have not changed much from their ancestors. They are 3 times larger than marmots as an adaptation against the cold, as larger animals with bigger surface area relative to volume lose less body heat, and have developed typical polar adaptations such as thicker fur and blubber. As marmots are burrowing animals, the shagrat was already well adapted for digging. The shagrat generally resembles its RMOT ancestor, and is also very similar to the South American capybara, the largest modern rodent. It is covered with long, shaggy, dark brown fur all over its body, and is very stocky and thick-set. Its legs are short and stocky, and its ears are small to regulate its internal temperature and prevent heat loss. They retain the large chisel teeth of their ancestors, and have large claws on the feet of their powerful forearms. The shagrat's coat is composed of 2 layers of fur. The dense layer of underfur traps warm air next to the body for insulation, whilst long, waterproof, hollow and air-filled guard hairs keep the underfur dry. This combination heavily insulates the shagrat against the Ice Age winter, and also allows it to briefly enter cold water without being soaked or chilled. Female shagrats give birth in early spring, following a gestation period which lasts throughout the winter. They are resilient against blizzards, and can survive in temperatures as low as -50. Shagrats are social animals which live together in herds of around a dozen animals, centered around a dominant bull male. After the females give birth in the early spring, about a third of a herd will consist of youngsters. In particularly cold weather, members of the herd will huddle together for warmth. If one member of the herd smells danger, it barks a warning and the whole herd leaps to attention. An unsettled herd assembles in an open space and, instinctively, the youngsters huddle in the middle. The adults surround them in a defensive formation, all facing outwards. When a predator is present, the shagrats bunch up even more closely, narrowing their eyes and baring their teeth, hissing in threat. The herds spend the winter at the northern edge of the birch and conifer forests south of the tundra, around the area where the French coast once was. They migrate back to the edge of the ice sheet following the end of the winter, to reach their summer grazing grounds. When searching for food after returning to the open tundra, shagrat herds spread out across meadows and root about, pushing rocks over with their strong forelegs to reveal the soil beneath. The big claws on their forefeet dig into the soil to reach underground grass stems and the roots of heather and willow. They must travel massive distances each day in order to find enough food to sustain themselves. Shagrats feed on various types of tundra grasses and cold-adapted shrubs, and are themselves the principal prey item of the snowstalker. When in groups they are well defended against predators by their numbers and comparatively large size, but animals like the snowstalker can pick off lost, injured, young, or elderly individuals, or use blizzards as cover to ambush herds. Now the shagrats are in real danger. Not from the blizzard, but from a predator, a snowstalker, that uses the snowstorm as a cover, stalking close to the herd. The snowstalker is a large predatory mustelid native to the North European ice of 5 million AD. It is an apex predator which preys on large animals such as shagrats. The snowstalker is descended from the wolverine, the largest of the mustelid, which were already vicious predators in the human era, though they were not apex predators. As a generalist scavenger and predator which would eat anything it could scavenge or kill, the wolverine was able to survive the human era mass extinction and adapt to fill the niches of extinct predators such as wolves and bears. With the coming of the Ice Age, the wolverine evolved further, developing thick, warm, white fur for insulation and for camouflage, as well as hairy soles for a better grip. The snowstalker's evolution of saber teeth is an example of convergent evolution, as the feature had previously evolved in the saber-toothed cats. The snowstalker is the only known example of a true placental mammal other than a feliform evolving saber teeth. As far as its basic physiology goes, the snowstalker has barely changed compared to its ancestor. It is larger and heavier than the wolverine, weighing up to 35 kilograms, and its canines have developed into a pair of saber teeth. It has powerful jaws, with a bite force of 900 kilograms. They are somewhat sexually dimorphic, males are larger than females. The snowstalker's fur is white, providing it with camouflage in blizzards and winter storms, and is thick and warm, insulating it from the cold. The soles of their feet are also covered in hair, to insulate them from the cold of the ground, and to help their grip on slippery ice. When they are not breeding or looking after cubs, snowstalkers are solitary and territorial, but because of the thin populations of prey, the territory of a single snowstalker may cover several square miles. They ferociously defend their kills from any other snowstalkers of the same gender that approach. Female snowstalkers do not hold territory of their own, but wander through the territories of males. They will sometimes allow a dominant male to do hunting for them, conserving their own energy, as males will allow females to eat from their kills in return for mating rights. They make their dens in shallow caves, which is usually the only shelter available on the tundra. Because of the massive distances between territories, snowstalkers mate only infrequently. To prevent inbreeding and genetic weakness, the female snowstalker enters estrus every 21 days, and once she mates, her fertilized eggs are held in suspension inside her. Eventually, after multiple matings, the embryos are implanted into her womb, and as the winter ends and the summer thaw begins, she will give birth to a litter of cubs born of many different fathers. Female snowstalkers take care of their cubs, traveling massive distances to find food for them, and, to teach them to hunt, mothers will chase prey animals back to their den for them to train on. If they struggle too much, the mother will demonstrate by injuring or outright killing the prey. Mothers also regurgitate food for very young cubs. Because big animals are rare on the tundra, snowstalkers will follow their prey for days, and have evolved a cautious hunting strategy. Using its white coat to blend in with the snow, especially during a blizzard, the snowstalker will ambush and injure, but not kill, its chosen prey item. Instead of risking injury by trying to finish the prey off, the snowstalker will simply trail its wounded victim until it bleeds to death. During the summer, when boggy greenery is flourishing, its white coat puts it at a disadvantage, though it may try to camouflage against rocky terrain or patches of snow. Snowstalkers always hunt alone. Snowstalker vocalizations are primarily roars and growls, not too dissimilar to human-era big cats such as tigers or leopards. The snowstalker's main prey item is the shagrat, giant rodents which wander the tundra in herds. When in groups, shagrats are well defended against predators by their numbers, and will bunch up together, bare their teeth, and hiss when they feel threatened, but snowstalkers often pick off lost, injured, young, or elderly individuals. In coastal regions, they may try to attack gannet whales or their eggs, but are often repelled by the long beaks of the gannet whales, or by their special defense. When threatened, gannet whales will regurgitate partially digested fish and squid, which is particularly noxious to the sensitive nose of a predator like the snowstalkers. Even with these defenses, gannet whales usually roost on remote islands, and are therefore only at risk when cold winters create ice bridges. The gannet whale has given up flying completely, so its wings can evolve just for swimming, like flippers on a sea lion or a penguin, so it can travel at high speed underwater. The gannet whale is a species of very large semi-aquatic flightless bird native to the North Sea and the coasts of the North European ice in 5 million AD. Descended from gannets, they fill the niches of animals like small-toothed whales. The Gannetwhale's ancestor, the northern gannet, was a semi-aquatic flying bird. Gannet whales are descended from the northern gannet. Gannets were unique among seabirds in that, when hunting fish, they dived below water and swims with its wings. This behavior, with its necessary adaptations, perfectly positioned the gannet to take advantage of the extinction of the marine mammals and fill absent niches. Their wings have become shorter, like flippers, and their feet have become rudders. About the size of a male walrus, gannet whales have a very different physiology to their aerial ancestors resembling pinnipeds more than anything else. Although they retain their long beaks, unable to fly, their wings have evolved into stubby paddles similar to fins which help them in swimming. Their feet are used as rudders. Although it may not look like it, the gannet whale still has a covering of feathers which are much denser and shorter than before, streamlining it and making it more aquadynamic. Below these dense feathers is a layer of blubberbath of which insulate it from the intense cold of the icy seas. The gannet whale has a number of specialized adaptations to its marine existence. Its nostrils automatically close up when it dives, preventing it from breathing water, and it has glands above its eyes which secrete excess salt, a mineral the gannet whale frequently ingests due to its diet of fish. Gannet whales are semi-aquatic animals which are ungainly and clumsy on land but swift predators in the water, where they can swim at up to 30 km an hour. Steering with their feet, they roost and nest on the land, going into the sea only to hunt, and like their ancestors are social animals, roosting in large groups. Gannet whales breed in the summer and lay a single egg, frequently nesting in large groups on remote islands. The egg, which takes a long time to hatch, incubation lasts well into the winter, is protected from the cold by being clutched to the underside of the mother's tail with her feet. When the egg hatches, a father fishes for food for the hatchling. As in human-era emperor penguins, the young gannet whale also takes a long time to grow into an adult, but they live in tightly knit family groups, and adults are protective of their young and their eggs. Gannet whales hunt various kinds of fish and squid and are completely safe from predators of their own in the sea, although adults are too large and dangerous with beaks capable of delivering serious wounds to be threatened by apex predators such as snowstalkers. When they are in a group, their eggs and young are vulnerable to predators, particularly as time equals 0.2s greater than. Unlike the marine mammals, gannet whales must lay their eggs on the land. To avoid predators, gannet whales nest on islands. but in cold enough winters, ice bridges provide access to predators, decimating gannet whale populations. However, they can also defend themselves by regurgitating partially digested fish and squid, which is too much for the sensitive noses of predators. With the end of the Ice Age, the world warms up and many of the animals that had adapted to the bitterly cold conditions of the Ice Age are unable to keep up with these rapid changes to their habitat and climate. The fauna of the snowy tundra, shagrats, gannet whales, and snowstalkers, go extinct. The gannet whales were criticized more than any other animal of 5 million AD by viewers, who pointed out that 5 million years would not be nearly enough time for gannets to abandon flight and evolve into seal-like birds. Realistically, such drastic evolution would take dozens, if not hundreds of millions of years. The snowstalker is generally regarded as being plausible. However, some viewers have pointed out that if the snowstalker attempted to subdue prey in a similar fashion to saber-toothed cats, the forces to its skull would have been too great. While the shagrat is generally regarded as a plausible species, some viewers have pointed out that even following a mass extinction and an ice age, many species of ungulates would be present and there wouldn't be any open niches for the shagrat to occupy. The Mediterranean salt flat is a very large salt flat or salt pan covering almost the entirety of the Mediterranean basin, which evaporated after becoming landlocked due to continental drift and falling sea level. 5 million ate a number of islands, the highlands of what were once true islands. The salt flatas do limestone karst plate house. Most life in the region is to be found on these islands due to the inhospitable conditions on the salt flat itself. Though there are a few hypersaline lakes on the flat, the water is far too salty to support fish or complex life and would be fatal if ingested. All that lives in these lakes are algae and bacteria which can feed on the salty chemical soup. On the shores support thick clouds of brine flies which feed on the algae and bacteria. Little life exists on the surface of the salt flat itself, though the salt-loving bacteria does thrive, the restaining the surface red in places. One of the few animals to exist out on the salt is a lizard, the cryptile, which is able to effectively camouflage its white body against the salt. The Scrofas are descended from the wild boar, Scrofa, which ranged across Europe in the human era, being highly adaptable generalist animals eating a wide variety of different foods. They were well poised to adapt to the rapid changes brought on by the closing of the Strait of Gibraltar, and trapped on the karst plate house became smaller with more elongated bonus harper hooves and longer snouts. Scrofas are similar physiologically to their ancestors but are smaller, only half the height of the bulkier wild boar, and more lightly built. Their legs are thin and agile with elongated bones and delicate pointed hooves, tips of which they walk on, giving them a stiff-legged gait. Although it looks unusual, this is an efficient way of moving over the karst, allowing them to prance agilely across the clint slabs and over grikes. Their flexible snouts, tipped with long lips longer than those of wild boars, whereand are essentially short trunks. Like their ancestors, Scrofas are generalist omnivores which will eat almost anything. Time equals 0 material, but they will also scavenge carrion and eggs, and even kill small, slow-moving animals. Their trunks are particularly useful for searching for food down grikes, wider examples of which they will enter in search of food. Scrofas are mainly social animals which live in small family herds, led by a pair of dominant females and composed mainly of their offspring. The only males in the herd are the juveniles, which leave upon reaching sexual maturity. Adult males are aggressive and solitary, hunting and foraging on their own, mating with the dominant female leaders of herds, and fighting other lone males for these mating privileges. Scroflets are born in the late spring, in litters of between 3 and 6, and are protected by other members of the herd. During foraging, 2 or 3 Scrofas will always be acting as sentries, looking out for predators. As Scrofas live in an environment where food is scarce, almost anything is on the menu for them, including cryptile eggs laid in grikes, which Scrofas can reach down using their long snouts. They may also kill smaller or slower animals they encounter on the karst. Adult Scrofas, especially the aggressive boars, are too large to be harmed by any predators on the karst, but Scroflets that stray from their herd may be preyed on by birds of prey and Grykens. Scrofa herds are safer on the edge of the karst, near the salt pan, but there is little food there. The most fertile regions on the karst are the uplands, the home of the Gryken. Down in a narrow grike, this slim, agile creature can wind from side to side, following the tortuous route of the chasm. Now and again the Gryken will stop and poke its head out of a Gryke, keeping an eye on a Scrofa herd. The Gryken is a species of large predatory mustelid endemic to the Mediterranean salt flat of 5 million AD. It evolved from the pine marten Martes martes, and lives in the grikes, crevices and fissures which separate clint slabs, of the karst plateaus and rocky mountains dotting the salt pan. The ancestor of the Gryken was the pine marten Martes martes, and, unlike many other mammals of 5 million AD, it has changed quite a bit compared to its ancestor. The arboreal pine martens had stocky, powerful legs for leaping and a long tail for maintaining balance in the trees. The Gryken, living in rocky crevices, needs neither of these, and has evolved a shorter tail and longer legs. However, its general body plan and head is similar to its ancestor, though its body is more elongated. In a case of minor convergent evolution, the Gryken, like the giant mustelid called the Snowstalker, has evolved very long fangs, which might be called saber teeth, though they are not as long as the Snowstalkers. The Gryken is about 7 to 8 or 20 centimeters tall at the shoulder, and is much longer. It is a streamlined animal with a slim body and a triangular head, with long and slim limbs to help it squeeze through narrow cracks, and a short tail. It also has a pair of long, dagger-like canine teeth which reach down past its lower jaw. The fur of its face is crossed by a thick black stripe which camouflage its eyes, and its body is also striped to break up its contours and disguise it amongst the vegetation. Living on the karst plateaus of the Mediterranean salt flat, Grykens spend most of their lives in grikes or crevices separating the clints in the uplands of the plateaus, as well as the systems of subterranean caverns which lie below the karst. When stalking prey, they hide themselves within the grikes, popping their heads out from time to time to keep an eye on their quarry, before leaping from the fissure and pouncing. To kill its prey, the Gryken punctures the throat with its saber teeth, tearing out the windpipe. To avoid being attacked whilst feeding, it may throw its dead prey down into the grikes and caves. The Gryken is called the worst enemy of the Scrofa, as it will hunt and kill scroflets which wander too far from the herd. However, adult scrofas are too large and dangerous for the Gryken to attack, and the aggressive boars will in fact charge at the Grykens. It will also attack smaller prey such as cryptiles, which frequently enter grikes to lay their eggs in soil. The eggs themselves are laid in grikes which are far too narrow for the Gryken to access. After hunting, the cryptile's pale coloring allows it to fade back into the white of the salt flats. So positioned, the animal is practically invisible. The cryptile or cryptile lizard is a species of agamid lizard endemic to the Mediterranean salt flat of 5 million AD. It is one of the only vertebrate animals which can survive on the salt pan itself, as opposed to the karst plateaus dotting the region. Lizards are generally adaptable, capable of surviving in a wide diversification on environments including harsh, dry deserts. With the closure of the Mediterranean Sea following the collision of Europe and Africa, agamids were already ready to adapt. To cope with the challenges presented by life out on the salt flats, lizards evolved streamlined bodies and prominent frills, gradually evolving into the cryptile. The cryptile generally maintains its resemblance to its agamid ancestors and is an example of parallel evolution, in this case with the frill-necked lizard. The cryptile's body and limbs have evolved to be more slender and elongated, in order to cover large distances while sprinting out on the salt flats. Its most prominent adaptation being its bizarre, colorful frill developed from loose skin around the neck. During courtship, males will compete, showing off their vivid crests, which are used to intimidate rivals and attract potential mates. These crests may also serve in regulating and maintaining the cryptile's internal temperature, by increasing the surface area to internal volume ratio. Cryptile frills are often used to intimidate other individuals and impress mates. An example of this would be during courtship where males will compete, displaying an array of color, showing of their crests. The female will invite the best-looking male to follow her in a courtship dash across the salt flat. If the male can keep up with her, the two can then mate. While cryptiles display exceptional adaptations for life on the flat, out on the limestone karst plateaus, the lizards must be wary, as they are vulnerable to predation from predators such as the Gryken. Cryptiles are specially adapted to feed on brine flies, from which they receive all their nourishment, including moisture. Though their only predators on the salt are birds of prey, which cryptiles can camouflage themselves against, the salty environment means that female cryptiles cannot lay their eggs on the flat, where the salt would drain them of moisture, killing them. For this, she must travel to the karst plateaus and lay them in the soil down a safe grike, narrow enough to prevent access by a Gryken. Nevertheless, the eggs may be eaten by Scrofas which shove their trunks down the grikes or even enter the grikes themselves, and the mother Cryptile herself as a prey item for the Gryken. In 5 million AD, the once great Amazon rainforest diminishes into the huge Amazon grassland, stretching for 3,000 kilometers across the South American landscape. The great courses of the Amazon River still support any forest at all. The rest of the Amazon basin has been replaced by grassland prairie. Ice caps may dominate the globe in 5 million AD, but, between the equator and the poles, there is still a diverse range of habitats. There are equatorial rainforests, tropical grasslands, tropical deserts, temperate woodlands, coniferous forests and tundra. Over time, these habitats have been compressed into narrower and narrower bands by the cooler climate. During the Holocene, the actions of humans threatened to destroy the equatorial rainforests. 5 million AD, much time after humankind, it has been further depleted by natural changes brought about by the new ice age. In the Amazon basin, the forest is reduced to scattered pockets, surrounded by broad stretches of savanna which reach out to the horizon. Rainfall is lower now than it has been for millions of years and the mighty Amazon River has dwindled. The vast network of tributaries that once made it the most voluminous river in the world have all but dried up. The dry conditions mean that the savanna is frequently swept by bushfires. These can be triggered by lightning strikes from an approaching summer tropical thunderstorm or a glint of sunlight. Once ignited, the periodic fires can sweep across hundreds of square miles at great speeds, destroying everything in their path. In the Amazon grassland, life has adapted to drought and fire in surprising ways. The grasses rely on the fires to clear the ground of other competing plant species, such as trees. If left to grow unchecked, trees can dominate the land, cutting out the sun with their thick canopies and monopolizing the soil with their roots. Grasses, on the other hand, are fast-growing plants and easily replace their burnt leaves with new growth from underground stems. They disperse their seeds when the fire has passed, and thrive in the dry habitat. In the wet season, though, fires are less frequent. The Amazon rainforest that once occupied this region was far more productive than the Amazon grassland, but when the forests in this part of the world declined, so too did the number and diversity of animal species, because South America is connected to the rest of the world only by the narrow strip of the Panama Isthmus, a connection which is periodically broken by changing sea levels and volcanic activity. Animal life has developed in the savanna in virtual isolation, cut off from the rest of the world and faced with drastic environmental changes. Those species which survived extinction have evolved new adaptations for life in this ecosystem. The animals here have lost the shelter of most trees and are now primarily exposed to wind and fire. Where once food was plentiful, animals must now cover great distances to find it. Armored plates of thick stiff hair make rattlebacks durable creatures able to withstand bushfires and defend themselves from angry carakillers. The South American rattleback grassland rattleback, or simply rattleback, is a species of rattleback, an armored rodent native to the Amazon grassland of 5 million AD. The rattlebacks evolved from a South American rodent called the paca when the Amazon rainforest disappeared, replaced by an open grassland. These rodents could no longer rely on the cover of the jungle to survive and so evolved heavy armor and spines for defense to face the challenges presented by that of an open environment. The South American rattleback has a North American cousin which migrated north and adapted to live in desert conditions. The South American rattleback is about the size of an otter. Its back is covered by movable plates which are composed of hardened matted hair like the armor of a pangolin or the horns of a rhinoceros. These plates are strong enough to withstand repeated blows from a carakiller and are also somewhat fireproof, allowing the rattleback to survive the bush fires which are common on the Amazon prairie and which the rattleback is too slow and heavy to escape. Additionally, its eyelids are covered in a protective layer of hardened skin to protect its eyes from the heat of fires. The rattleback has smaller non-movable scales on its head as well as the plates. 0.2s greater than it also has a fringe of long, hard, sharp spines or quills on either side of its body, just below the edge of its plates, as well as on the crown of its head. The rattleback is broadly omnivorous, mainly eating grass stems, roots, and tubers, but it will also feed on carrion and the eggs of birds and reptiles. It is a solitary, highly territorial animal which only comes together to mate and does not otherwise tolerate other rattlebacks. When two individuals meet, they engage in displays, rattling their plates to make noise. The louder rattleback is the winner. When it is attacked, the rattleback is able to use the fringe of spines along its sides to hunker itself down into the earth, making it almost impossible to dislodge and protecting its vulnerable underside. The rattleback's taste for eggs brings it into conflict with animals such as carakillers, communal nesters who defend their eggs. However, carakillers are usually unable to kill rattlebacks on account of their armor. Like carakillers, rattlebacks will scavenge carrion following forest fires. The face is round and almost human, its skin naked and red, framed in a lion-like mane. These animals are monkeys. The Babookari is a social ground-dwelling New World monkey native to the Amazon grassland of 5 million AD. The Babookari is descended from the Wakari, which was readily able to adapt to life on the grasslands following the loss of the Amazon rainforest. Although an arboreal animal, the Wakari spends a lot of time on the forest floor, and is broadly omnivorous. More importantly, it already has a complex social system, which is important for life on the grasslands. As the trees thinned out, Wakaris further developed their social system and began to live in large, social groups, allowing them to forage, communicate and thrive in their rapidly changing habitat. Due to its ground-dwelling behavior, the Babookari has longer limbs than a Wakari, more like those of a baboon, allowing it to cover long distances on the ground. A Babookari is fast enough to easily evade a lone carakiller. It is quadrupedal, but still retains high levels of dexterity in its hands. In order to better communicate in the long grass of the Amazon prairie, the Babookari has streaks of bright blue on its face, buttocks, and chest, as well as a very long, erect, non-prehensile tail which reaches above the top of the grass. The tail does not attract the attention of predators because it resembles an unusually thick blade of grass. Like its ancestor the Wakari, the Babookari has a bald red head, but unlike its ancestor, its cheeks feature blue triangular patterns, with smaller black streaks, and the bald skin of the chest is also blue and black. Also unlike its shaggy ancestor, much of the hair on its torso has become very short, save for a long mane around its neck. The color of this mane ranges from reddish-brown to yellow, whilst the rest of the Babookari's hair ranges from brown to red and yellow, sometimes with red or purple streaks on the limbs, shoulders, back, and tail. Some individuals also seem to have very short beards of yellow stubble. Out on open grasslands, Babookaris have established large social groups, allowing them to forage, cover large distances and stay alert for predators. Having high levels of dexterity in their hands, similar to human-era chimpanzees, Babookaris have mastered tool use, now constructing and weaving traps to catch fish. These learnt behaviors, passed down from generation to generation, allow Babookaris to trap large numbers of fish, of which provide important sources of protein. The Babookaris role is similar to human-era baboons. Babookaris are omnivorous and often feed on fish, and are themselves an important prey item to carakillers, which have evolved complex ways of hunting the primates. In turn, the Babookari social system also became more complex in order to deal with the threat of carakillers. On a grassy plain, even if the grass is long, there is little cover. Large predatory animals cannot hunt by stealth, so instead they must hunt by speed. The swiftest hunter of the Amazon grasslands is a flightless bird called T. Carakiller. The carakiller is a species of huge 2.5-meter-tall predatory flightless bird native to the Amazon grassland of 5 million AD. It is a descendant of the Carakiller and through convergent evolution closely resembles the terror birds which hunted the same area dozens of millions of years prior. According to Professor Jeremy Rayner, flight is rather expensive, requiring many evolutionary energies invested into muscles, tendons and hollow bones. With this in mind, following the death of the rainforest, the Carakiller instead decided to invest these evolutionary energies into a more terrestrial lifestyle, evolving into a huge predatory flightless bird. The The Carakiller has convergently evolved with the terror birds, complete with long sturdy legs, powerful beak and claws. What stands out most about the Carakiller is the coloration, comprised primarily of reds and yellows with a display of feathers at its head. These are used for communicating when hunting, as shown in the documentary. These may also be used to display aggressive behavior, intimidate other individuals, ward off other predators and impress mates. The Carakillers communicate through vocal noises. This enables them to work effectively during hunts. The Carakillers have established breeding systems similar to present-day ostriches and emus. Multiple females mate with a male and lay eggs in one communal nest. The male then guards it, leaving occasionally to feed the causes for a communal nest. The same as in the said ratites, it is easier to guard a single large nest than multiple smaller ones. The nest itself is a depression in the ground lined with vegetation. Carakillers are among the top predators of Amazon grassland. While adults have no predators, Carakiller eggs are often discovered and eaten by rattlebacks due to rattlebacks' desire to eat eggs. Although the Carakiller's preferred prey are Babookaris, they will take advantage of any opportunities provided to find food. These characteristics can be observed during seasonal bushfires, when the gigantic birds will feed on whatever animals have fallen casualty to the fires. With the end of the ice, Agath world warms up and the Amazon is yet again a tropical rainforest. The animals of the prairie, greater than adapted to grassland life, go extinct. Many viewers found the Carakiller impractical. Arguments include that it would take many tens of millions of years to transition from flight to ground dweller, and that killing prey with kicks would be more logical rather than using its beak. A better candidate would be the Suriema, which is already terrestrial, and whose distant relatives are the extinct terror birds. In general, a more likely path of evolution for the Caracara, or any bird of prey, would be to evolve a vulturine or perhaps even peacock-like body form. Some fans have suggested that, although the general idea of the Babookari is plausible, another species of monkey such as the capuchin would be a better candidate than the Wakari for the Babookari's ancestor, given that the bald Wakari is a vulnerable species. Other arguments include, while most primates are either endangered or have declining populations, within 5 million years numerous species would still be present rather than just one. Viewers have found numerous traits and characteristics of the South American rattleback impractical. Such traits include an almost snake-like head, and having very little armor near the head and neck, both of which would prove to be exposed weak points. The South American rattleback is presented as having fire-resistant scales, however having plates comprised of keratin would not be ideal, as the rattleback would be left vulnerable to the seasonal fires. Other viewers have pointed out it is doubtful the evolution of the rattlebacks could even occur, given the Amazon rainforest is already home to armored species such as armadillos. $5 million later, the central United States becomes a cold, sandy and rocky desert. The North American continent is covered by an ice sheet that ends just south of the border between what were once the United States and Canada, to where the human city of Chicago once stood. The central region of North America is cold and dry. The atmospheric temperature is so low that the air has little capacity for holding moisture. What was once the most productive agricultural land on the planet is now little more than a vast, barren dust bowl. Along the eastern edge of the continent, the Atlantic Ocean has receded, leaving a broad coastal plain topped by the Appalachian Mountains. Inland, there is an unending expanse of cold sand and cracked rock. The North American desert is as bitterly cold as the Gobi Desert was in East Asia. It stretches for about 2,400 kilometers until it finally fetches up against the rocky barrier formed by the glacier-ridden Rocky Mountains away to the west. All year long, piercing winds moving 100 km an hour sweep southwards from the ice, stirring up vicious sandstorms and scouring away any potentially productive pockets of soil. Occasionally, winds howl in from the coastal regions, but very little rain reaches the interior. What precipitation there is tends to be snow, but even this falls infrequently. Any snow cover on higher ground is thin and patchy. There is a significant difference in temperature between the equator and the edge of the ice cap, producing a steep temperature gradient from north to south. This leads to unstable conditions, with screaming tornadoes ripping across the interior far more frequently than they did during previous times. Vegetation is sparse in this harsh, arid landscape. Only the hardiest of plants exist, but in small numbers. Indeed, very little life can survive above ground. Those animals able to live in this bleak desert must withstand freezing temperatures and protect themselves from the violent storms. The animal inhabitants of the North American desert are supreme specialists, brilliantly adapted to cope with the specific demands of an uncompromising habitat. Some species have adapted physically, whilst others have altered their living environment. Animals that live here need to last out times when food is in short supply. In order to do so, they have developed remarkable strategies for storing energy and conserving food. Some animals have even developed altruistic feeding habits, sharing food with other colony members to ensure the survival of the species as a whole. Deathgleaners can be seen hanging in the air, resting on updrafts of wind blown off the sandy ridges below. They circle like vultures, seeking an easy meal on the ground. Now and again, one wheels and banks, signaling to the others that it has found something. Soon, a large group will gather and prepare to feast. The Deathgleaner is a species of giant, social, diurnal bat native to the North American desert and Rocky Mountains of 5 million AD. With a wingspan of about 1.3 meters and a body weight of roughly 600 grams, it is the largest known carnivorous bat in history, and of all bats, only some frugivorous human-era megabats were larger. Its mouth alone is about 3 centimeters long, and its teeth are 1/8 of 3 millimeters long. As the cold desert spread across North America, the Deathgleaner's forest-dwelling ancestor evolved to become larger and more social in order to cover more ground in its search for prey. As the bitterly cold conditions of the 5 million AD Ice Age spread across North America, bats were able to occupy the niches left over by numerous species of hawks and vultures, which had experienced huge declines in biodiversity. The Deathgleaner has become diurnal in order to avoid the freezing temperatures of the desert night. In terms of overall appearance and wing structure, the Deathgleaner hasn't evolved much from its forest-dwelling ancestors. The Deathgleaner is much larger than most extant bats. Though compared to most present bats, the Deathgleaner is relatively skinny. Deathgleaners will avoid excessive heat loss by cooling the blood before it passes through the systematic veins. Any heat taken from the blood entering the wing membrane is used to warm the blood returning from the wings. Another factor which allows bats to survive was being able to go into torpor, an involuntary state of physical and mental activity similar to hibernation. These efficient strategies for regulating body temperature alone have allowed bats to survive and thrive in an environment, whilst numerous species of mammals and birds have gone extinct. The Deathgleaner has become diurnal in order to avoid the freezing temperatures of the desert night. At nightfall, Deathgleaners will return to their roosts, huddling together in large groups to conserve heat. Any leftover scraps from attacks are returned and shared with uneaten members of the bat colony. Sharing food not only aids the survival of certain individuals but of the entire species. An important prey item for the Deathgleaner is the Spink, a subterranean flightless bird which lives in underground colonies. As Spinks are usually inaccessible to Deathgleaners in their burrows, the bats have two main hunting strategies. The first is to follow a North American rattleback or look out for one digging, as rattlebacks frequently dig up desert turnips from Spink burrows, scattering the birds on the surface and exposing them to Deathgleaners. Alternatively, recently matured Spinks gather on the desert surface during the night to mate, so Deathgleaners which hunt in the early hours of dawn may find some stragglers still exposed. Although Deathgleaners may hunt lost baby rattlebacks, their armor is tough and unpalatable, and the bats will not attack a large adult. Rattlebacks can make themselves seem larger and more frightening by shaking their scales, the sharp edges of which could easily tear a Deathgleaner's delicate wings. South American rattlebacks were highly successful on the dry grasslands that were spreading across the Amazon basin. So much so, in fact, that they were able to migrate northwards into the North American desert. There, the rattleback evolved into yet another species, one adapted for the cold desert environment. The North American rattleback or desert rattleback is a species of rattleback, an armored rodent, native to the North American desert of 5 million AD. It is a descendant of the South American rattleback. The South American rattleback managed to expand its range with several individuals crossing the Amazon basin, before migrating towards North America. As desert conditions are much different from roaming through an open savanna, the rattleback has undergone numerous physical alterations in order to withstand the harsh desert conditions of the American Midwest. The desert rattleback is less heavily built than its grassland cousin, provided the absence of large predators. Compact, closely linked. Scales provide the perfect defense against sandstorms, while the addition of thick hair shields the rattleback's face. The North American rattleback's ears and lips are less visible, as increased exposure to cold air can potentially lead to frostbite. Desert rattlebacks will provide both care and protection toward their young and must cover larger distances in search of food sources. Being an intelligent animal, the rattleback relies on its sense of smell to locate and unearth desert turnips, the rattleback's preferred source of water. Desert rattlebacks must cover large distances to locate desert turnips, as in the desert very little if any water is located. While digging for turnips, the rattleback may accidentally expose a burrowing spink. While the rattlebacks tolerate the spinks, unearthed the unfortunate animals are left vulnerable to predation to predators such as the Deathgleaner. With the end of the Ice Age, the world warms up and many of the animals that had adapted to the bitterly cold conditions of the Ice Age are unable to keep up with these rapid changes to their habitat and climate. The spink's wings have evolved into strong, spade-like forelimbs for digging tunnels deep below the desert. Thespinck is a species of eusocial flightless subterranean galliform bird, about 8 cm long, endemic to the North American desert. The spink is descended from a species of quail, which are already ground-dwelling in the human era. The spink lost its ability to fly and became smaller and sleeker in order to become a burrowing animal, allowing it to survive in the harsh environment of the North American desert. Its wings have adapted into shovel-like appendages with hardened feathers. The spink's body plan is very different to that of a regular bird, as they are entirely quadrupedal, moving with a crawling, shuffling gait. The feathers of each wing have become horny scales better suited for digging, and the wings themselves are capable of independent movement in order to shovel earth. The spink crawls in much the same way as it digs, levering itself forward with its elbows, its weight supported by horny pads at the joints. The spink's beak, which can also be used for digging, is heavily flattened and is surrounded by a fringe of sensitive hairs which allow the nearly blind spink to better detect its immediate surroundings. Their feathers range in color from dark brownish-gray to white, and they are patterned with dark, sometimes black, stripes and patches along their sides and faces. Like most birds, they appear to be sexually dimorphic, with males having brighter white bodies and darker, more defined markings as well as an extra stripe on the throat. Spinks, despite being drastically different from their ancestors, have similar breeding habits. Like other galliform birds, it has a lek breeding system located in a single area. The males sing and try to gather the attention of females. The lek eventually ends when the sun comes up and they get back to work, digging and finding food as usual. Spinks principally feed on the sugar-rich sap of desert turnips, which is also the favored food item of the North American rattleback. Spink burrow systems are based around areas where this turnip is abundant, but their tunnels are frequently dug out or otherwise disturbed by rattlebacks searching for turnips, which they sometimes find by seeing spinks kicking sand out of their burrows. Spinks are preyed on by deathgleaners, giant bats, which find them by following rattlebacks and waiting for them to disturb the spinks and scare them out onto the surface, or by hunting on the spinks' mating grounds at first light. With the end of the Ice Age, the world warms up and many of the animals that had adapted to the bitterly cold conditions of the Ice Age are unable to keep up with these rapid changes to their habitat and climate. The fauna of the desert's North American rattlebacks, spinks, and deathgleaners go extinct.